in most cases of major disaster, and it takes a long time to organize activities of search and rescue, medical aid, etc. The agency is entrusted with the task to help the affected people become helpless. We have been experiencing this for years, and herein lies the role of preparedness. The more prepared we are, the less will be the problem when the disaster event has occurred. One also needs to appreciate that response operations usually have to be carried out under very difficult and more often than not traumatic conditions, as it happened in case of Uttarakhand and other cases, with heavy demands on personnel, equipment, and scarce logistics and resources. While there are examples of good and not so good response in the face of disaster, sound planning, well-structured organization, and of course capacity building, as the Home Minister also highlighted this morning, are extremely essential. Our experiences in some of the major disasters bring out the need of a very high degree of preparedness, but also skill, equipment, and a good understanding of the hazard and vulnerability condition of a particular area. And of course, all these should be a part of our policy and plan. It is also important to note that disaster response plan should be disaster specific, because unlike mitigation and prevention, it is more necessary to have response plans which are disaster specific, area specific, and tailor-made to specific needs of potentially affected communities. We need to attend to a host of uncertainties which may cripple us in our response initiatives, such as loss of communication, which again and again we see, damage to key installations such as power supplies, and non-availability of key personnel, as it happened in case of Srinagar recently, adverse weather conditions following disaster impact, as seen in case of Kedarnath tragedy, and inadequate public awareness and community preparedness, just to name a few of these. So all these aspects must be kept in mind when we prepare for response. The intricate relationship between planning and response, utilization of resources primarily in the response mode, and significance of the standard operating procedures for response agencies needs to be understood. Preparedness involves knowing what to do, how to do it, and who will do it in the aftermath of a disaster. Because of course, very often we know what to do, but very often there are gaps in planning how to do it and who will do it. And there is a lot of confusion, because in our plans we say this must be done, but exactly when something happens, who will start operating immediately, that becomes a problem. It also necessitates that one should be equipped with the right tools such as humanitarian logistics and appropriate equipment. In recent times, the concept and tools of humanitarian logistics have become important. Of course, these were basically developed and utilized in case of supply chain management, but some of these tools and technology can be used in case of disaster response. Again, at the cost of repetition, I would like to say that the challenge in having a system which can cope with uncertainties in terms of time, place, and duration of the hazard event needs to be addressed. Because unless we are able to address the issue of how to cope with uncertainty in terms of time, duration of the hazard event and place, we will not be able to have an effective response. Preparedness needs to include different stakeholders such as government organizations, individuals and business entities. For each of these, there are several segments and individuals. A preparedness plan has to identify the roles of stakeholders, equip them appropriately, and build their capacity well in advance. It also includes aspects such as emergency operation centers, equipment, emergency medical services, and warning system. The efficacy and effectiveness of response will depend on preparedness, to which aspects such as technology, even the Home Minister highlighted this morning, capacity building, and sometimes we ignore in our plan and preparedness the role of media, whether how to manage the media in the sense that it is not that we will manipulate the media, but how to utilize the media for warning system, for dissemination of information, and also how to interact with the media so that people are able to know the real situation. And of course, tools of humanitarian logistics, which can influence our effectiveness a great deal. So to summarize, I would like to say that whatever insights we have got from our recent experiences, that disaster response is complex, though very often when a disaster takes place, we see pictures of how comprehensively people are being rescued, helped. But the most important thing is that first few hours, sometimes first 1 or 2 days also, we are not as well organized. Even if we analyze in depth the most successful rescue and response efforts, there is always a gap in the first few hours and days till equipment and personnel are mobilized. And if we can reduce that period, more lives will be saved, damage can be minimized. Another aspect of the whole concept of response and rescue is that we must build the capacity of the community, because however much we have prepared, however effective our system is, it takes time to reach the site of the event. Because again, same thing, uncertainty, we do not know where the event will occur. It is the community which first responds, and the more capable, more organized, more motivated the immediate community is, they will be able to save people during the first few hours. Some studies show that even in developed countries, for example in Japan also, the Kobe earthquake, I happened to go through a book some years ago, the first-hand experience written by a fireman, because they are the fire services those days. I'm talking about 95 or 2000, means 50, 20 years ago. Even in Japan, those days the fire services were actively involved in rescue and response. One fireman who himself participated, and he writes, of course, very many places, he is very emotional, what he saw, how people suffered and so on. And there also he has quantified, he has said that at least 50% of the people who were saved, they were by the community. And many other examples, lot of studies show, however developed the system may be, the community has played an important role. So this community preparedness, community awareness and community capacity building is extremely important. Some efforts were made a few years ago as a part of the UNDP project, where at the village level certain groups were formed, one group for relief activities, one group for search and rescue. Like that, group of village youth were formed, they were trained, so that if something happens, they will be the first to respond till, of course, fire services, armed forces or NDRF reach the site. These are some of the points I would like to highlight, and very often we get submerged in our conceptual issues, equipment, procedures and structures, but we must remember that our main challenge is how to cope with the uncertainty. For example, equipment. When a major disaster takes place, of course, forces like NDRF can play an important role. But if something like the Gujarat earthquake or the tsunami takes place, a lot of other equipment are required, earth-moving machines, removing debris and so on, bulldozers, cutters, so many things are there, and they are required in thousands in number, and it is impossible to keep that ready to be deployed at the time of a major disaster, even in one place. Of course, you cannot think of keeping it at the place where the disaster takes place because we do not know where it will occur. But assuming that we have the money and we can afford and have those equipment cannot be maintained. You can't just keep idle large number of equipment to be used at the time of a disaster. So what is normally done, and of course a lot of initiatives have been taken in the form of a inventory of such resources, their details, address and so on, in a way that it can be, the information can be retrieved and those equipment can be mobilized and sent to these areas. Of course, some such work in the form of India Disaster Resource Network and all, but that needs to be updated. Because I remember at the time of Gujarat earthquake, that time I was in it, of course the day it happened, in agriculture department, somebody wanted some earth moving machines to be sent. Then the Land Development Corporation, they very promptly mobilized those machines. But when it was to be sent, they realized that they have got the machines, but you can't send it just 400, 500 kilometers. They didn't have the trailer or the other equipment through which it can be transported. So this type of lack of coordination takes place. So whether we can be prepared in a way that, so this is what I think it requires a lot of detailed planning. But finally I would like to say that we need to have all those organizational and structural preparedness, but also the skill the type of skill which NDRF has built, and it has been a very great achievement for the country to have a force like NDRF, and I must compliment Sri O.P. Singh and his team for organizing this Raging Day function and including certain substantive content in the form of discussion and also in the afternoon demonstration as a part of the Raging Day program. And I wish the NDRF all success in its future endeavors. NDRF should continue its efforts, not only being a very skillful organization, but also helping others as it has been doing in building the capacity of various state disaster response forces, and also in even the communities. I think they have been participating. And also thank those former members like Mr. Singh and Sinha who have in the past contributed a great deal to the emergence of such structural and organizational innovations. And finally, I thank all of you in the NDRF for giving me an opportunity to share some of the ideas and experiences. And thank you all.
To manage any disaster, whatever its magnitude. And now I request Sri O.P. Singh, DG NDRF, to kindly present a memento to Dr. P.K. Mishra as a token of our remembrance.
Dr. Mishra, you have given us a wider picture of disaster preparedness and response. It's needless to say that effectiveness of any humanitarian aid, more so in the disaster management, depends totally on the state of preparedness that we have. While the preparedness is a very ongoing dynamic process, response becomes more visible, it becomes more face of the program. And you have rightly said, sir, that search and rescue is a specialized job which needs to be added with and complemented with the specialized technical equipments. We also agree that training is a very important domain, and for developing capabilities of various stakeholders, training is really required. Sir, there is no denying the fact that the emergency response becomes the most visible face of disaster management. And coupled with this is the medical aid, provisioning of so many things like water, milk and so many things. And last but not least, we need to have a disaster response plan. Now may I invite the distinguished gathering here, if anyone has a question to ask, we can have I think another 5 to 10 minutes we can have a discussion on that. If anybody has a query to ask from Dr. Mishra, he is most welcome. Or any comments, not only the question, any comments. Anybody can have any observations, is most welcome. Yes, sir.
Health Head Card. International Health Head Card. You touched upon in your lecture that management of international relief also is a point of view. It was observed in Haiti that the money that came, much of it was wrongly used, and many of the people who were involved in doing relief operations were found in casinos spending those money. Some countries have developed a mechanism, particularly Indonesia and others, to have a business organization attached to their disaster response mechanism to keep a watch on this. Should we have something like that in India?
Haiti, of course, as you rightly said, there were a lot of problems. Haiti, of course, is a wrong example in the sense that most of the things didn't work there. So, about the relief materials, as you rightly said, a lot of relief materials they got, but they didn't have the capacity to distribute. The other thing you said that there should be some oversight. relief, there are three things actually. One is relief material can come which are not required. For example, even in case of the Kutch, Gujarat earthquake, a lot of clothes came, like those days jeans and other types of clothes which the villagers didn't want actually, they were all thrown away. So relief material, what we should get, what we should not get, there can be some planning in advance. Then of course distribution, that's why that humanitarian logistics can be extremely important now, that how to distribute, because huge quantity comes and there is total confusion everywhere. And many cases only the villages which are more vocal, accessible, they get, remote villages don't get also. Third thing is oversight, of course, a lot of misappropriation takes place. In fact, after the tsunami, that was 2004 December, in the beginning of 2005, in Jakarta, the Transparency International and European Union and ADB, they organized an international conference on how to reduce corruption in tsunami relief, but the relief phase, because huge amount is spent and misused. So that time I was invited to present a case study of the Gujarat experience, how it was prevented or at least reduced. So some of this mechanism can be put in place.
Sir, after your brilliant exposition, I would preparedness, community preparedness and departmental preparedness. And that is introduction of early warning system for certain types of natural disasters. We have in Northeast, we could devise and practically bring to a very good level early warning system for floods which occur with clockwork regularity. And now at the moment we are trying, that has been going on since 2009. Now we are trying early warning system for landslides.
For
landslides,
okay.
Which is another a bit neglected natural disaster, but it claims lot of, it does a lot of damage. And the first experiment, we had Dr. Shailesh Nayak in Ministry of Earth, and we have got a good project given to the Amrita University in Kerala, who are doing this experiment. And today, our team has gone to Sydney, thanks to Professor Vinod Sharma, and there it is working on preliminaries. Next time, when we go to install the sensor, we shall request Association of India so that they are aware of it, and then we can expand. Because in the Northeast and of course in Uttarakhand, etc., there is a lot of scope for early warning system which can really save lives.
Right, thank you, sir. Mr. Srivastava, of course, many of you might not be knowing. He was a very, very senior officer in the IAS, and he is, for a long time, he has been working on disaster management, particularly in the Northeast. So it's a very, very relevant thing, sir, that early warning is important, and it is extremely important for preparedness, for response, and so on. But in the context of early warning, I would just like to mention that early warning implies 3 or 4 things which are very important. That when we talk about early warning, whether it is for cyclone, for flood, or for landslide, actually there are 4 stages or 4 components. One is the basic science, in the sense that for cyclone, for example, there has to be the basic knowledge, the science, how it develops, how it progresses, and so on. The second part is that based on that basic science, they should be able to, the weathermen or those who are in charge, able to predict how it will move or landfall. Based on the basic thing, the prediction should be also fairly good prediction, in the sense that even if somebody knows about cyclone, the actual progress depends on the temperature at that time, pressure, and so on. That forecast should be there. Third thing is, again, that scientific agency or IM meteorological department should be able to prepare the messages properly. Because like in case of months rainfall, they talk about at scattered to heavy to very heavy at some places, few places, most places. So, but many people cannot come. So the properly, the message should be comprehensible. Fourth thing should be that it's disseminated. Means the people who are to be affected or likely to be affected or in the danger, they should receive that message. So unless we look at these 4 stages, in spite of our knowledge, the early warning system will not be effective. Of course, the final one is that it should be credible. People should believe it and should be prepared to take remedial measures. So these aspects, because again one cyclone, I remember that all the forecasts were there, everything was there, but it never reached the people who, very often they can be in the remote areas. So that we must take care of these 4 or 5 components for a very effective, similarly in case of landslide. After doing the forecast and early warning, it must reach because the areas must be very remote. So that is what is important. Yes, Professor Sharma.
I think you have covered almost all important point about response and quick response. But I think now in 10 years, NDRF is fully equipped with the basic training and medical response or collapse structure search and rescue. But I think specialized training is required for that. And you have mentioned this thing, use of technology, and now the search and rescue is a specialized subject basically. And the basic knowledge is with them, there is no doubt in it, and they are doing wonderful job, whatever equipment given to them. But there should be some plan, for upgrading their skill basically. So this is one. Second thing is that the Emergency Operations Center, as you have mentioned, I think every state, this should be a priority area that every state should have a state-of-art emergency operations center if you want quick response. And third thing is the Himalayan state, say, Sikkim for example. NDRF, they were fully equipped, but they couldn't reach in time because the terrain and all that, and I think this air connectivity thing, which Honorable Home Minister mentioned, I think this should take priority, and they should have their own helicopters, their own system. I think there is a need of upgrading this force, which is already doing wonderful job. There is no doubt in it, that we all appreciate.
All 3 are very important, must be done. This side there were 2, 3. Yes. Mr. Sinha.
The Home Minister pointed out the need for a synergy between the civil defense fire services and the disaster mechanism, response mechanism. This is one of the most vital things, and you have referred to the need for the capacity building of the community. Now, the comment is that it needs to be done immediately. Everyone is talking about it, but it has not yet been put together. It should be done immediately. That's all what I want to say.
Right, yeah.
A benchmark for disaster preparedness and response. How close are we to it?
Having at what kind of a preparedness do we want for responding to disasters. But nevertheless, India is also progressing in the same direction in terms of we have started and all have saying in this. United Nations, UNISDR is setting a benchmark for the preparedness index and also for responding to that index. So far, they have not been confirmed that this is that. It is under preparation. So that's that information to the House. Thank you so much.
And better prepared now than probably a few years ago. As the Odisha cyclone.
Right, sir. And in the regions of SARC, we are devising that standard also. And we are soon be analyzing all the regional response mechanism, including of the different models also. And that would help, and maybe this, by the end of this month we will be able to share this with the National Disaster Authority.
On this point, I would like to mention that how well prepared we are. In fact, I am fully conversant with the INSARA guidelines, and I can see that today NDRF is completely up to the mark as per the INSARA standard, number one. Number two, it is one unique distinction of NDRF which has not been mentioned so far. And recently there was in first week of December, there was a conference in which I was there, and I mentioned this point, that NDRF today is the single largest dedicated disaster response force in the world, capable of dealing with national disaster and severe emergency. And even when I made this statement in the conference, everybody accepted that we are the single largest dedicated disaster response force in the world. Capability, as I mentioned, it's capable. I have studied about various response forces in the world, and it is second to none in the world. It proved itself in the Japan triple disaster event. So, and one part I will mention, that in the last 10 years or 9 years, from the day NDM was set up and NDRF was set up, and today, where we have come, I gave one case study presentation in UN. That is, that Mr. Mishra is aware that in 1999, when we had Odisha super cyclone, 240 kilometers per hour, the casualty was 10,000. Last 2 years, 2013, we had cyclone Philin, and 14, we had cyclone Hudud in the same area. Instead of 240, it was 220 kilometers per hour. But the casualty came down from 10,000 to 21 in cyclone Philin and 17 in cyclone Hudud. It is multiple efforts, initiative of the government of India that has gone into, and that must be taken note of. So that's one point. But one issue also I want to raise you. Tell you, very rightly said that the community is a very important aspect of preparedness. But like the Disaster Management Act has 3 clear institutional mechanisms: NDMA, SDMA, DDMA at national, state, and district level. Similarly, we had a national vision of response mechanism also. NDRF at the national level, it has come up very well. At the state level, we have been advocating to have a state disaster response force, because NDRF cannot reach everywhere, and it is meant for level 3 disaster. But for level 2 disaster and level 1 disaster, the states must have its own capability. With continued advocacy, some of the states have agreed, but I think a lot needs to be done so that states also must have at least a small 1 or 2 company of a state disaster response force. That is level 2nd tier. And 3rd tier mechanism is at the district and grassroots level. Civil defense, fire services, home guards, local police and community. If all these 3 levels, NDRF, SDRF and the district level DSK forces, if they all are reasonably well trained and properly synergized, we'll have the best response mechanism in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. This side,
correctly, you have told, sir, that Kesa Foods, it was very difficult to send a lot of heavy equipment at the site. So we should at least prepare railway, keep a open trailer kind of thing to transport this kind of equipment. And with NDRF is doing very well. We have seen in Jammu and Kashmir, it was a wonderful rescue what they did. And similar kind of forces we should have in the state as well as at district level, what correctly.
good suggestion.
And media is playing a very wonderful role for displaying all the things across the country.
Thank you. Next.
I am B.M. Vora. I retired as Director General Civil Defence. See, civil defence has been in a very bad shape all through our day. And that was the condition. I don't know how much it is, but it's a huge force actually. And same with home guards. There are about 15 lakh home guards in the country, but they have become a B team of police and permanently doing the police work, as we all know. So I think that the states will have to be involved very seriously into it. civil defense personnel are given some kind of training, which is some kind of a training in disaster, as you know very well. So I think let us involve the states and this B team or C team or state teams, state level teams, which KM Singh talked, and they are the ones. So DG civil defense in states they can all be added to your strength, and it can be a huge volunteer response force. Thank you.
Very good. The last one, the lady next.
Can I, sir?
Digital technology is a very important technology, and somehow it is not putting in right place, or you can say that we are not using it very user friendly. So I am requesting that it should be used in such a way that everybody can use it and use very effectively in each phase of disaster. So we need to focus to how to give the importance.
No, that is very important. That is very important because, for example, very often if earthquake or landslide, it takes a lot of time to know what has happened. But through geospatial technique, one can know much faster.
Yeah. But it is not applicable in it is applicable. People are not using it.
People are not. Yeah. I agree with you.
I understand you're all motivated by Dr. P.K. Mishra's lecture and inputs that he's giving, but due to lack of time, Shri O.P. Singh, DG NDRF, to kindly...
Can I speak? It's important. You need to know what I'm teaching. Please be brief. Yeah, I'm brief. I'm a journalist. I work for a Japanese news agency. In Japan, there are earthquakes and tsunami system called a SMS sending system. If there is an earthquake, probability to occur in a certain area, people get SMS, irrespective of the service in that area, of the service provider, or every person gets an SMS and every few minutes they keep on getting it, and the tsunami warning also they get it. And that's the reason now everybody beforehand gets forewarned and moves. And this is done by a central response system which is there in Tokyo, and it's very effective. I suggested this to your meteorological department, to disaster management authority. The file goes up, down, the net again goes up and down, and nothing happens. If this is done, say if there is a cyclone or anything happening in a certain area, and then again, the Japanese are willing to help, but nobody is willing to respond from the government side on this issue.
Thank you very much. I would sincerely suggest that DG NDRF and the Secretary NDMA may consider a 2-day workshop or a session where all those who are interested would come and give suggestions. The other 2 points, the small points I want to make, sir, is that we should have an equipment bank of high-tech equipment located within the state. When it is not required in disaster, they can be used by the highway authorities and other people who need high-tech equipment, and can be given on rental within the state. And otherwise, it should be there, people can be trained. Second thing, sir, a huge big delegation went to the US in 11 and 12. 30 senior most officers from all states. And we were shown mobile command centers. They were mobile, equipped with VHF frequency, UHF, HF, and they were having the weather station. They had an inbuilt radio station, and those command centers, ready-made. There's a certain firm which is making it for the US, and it was costing around 2.5 crore. And I don't think there is anything in it. Even if we get one and prepare after that, we develop ourselves in one of our things. And they had that beautiful thing. We saw it, sir, the wind speed and the snowfall rate, and all this was being depicted on big screens in that mobile command center. And you could just run them anywhere. So I think all this put together will be very helpful, and it will suitably upgrade our capacity.
Thank you very much. Though all your valuable suggestions have been noted here. And now I request Shri O.P. Singh, DG NDRF, to kindly present a memento to Dr. P.K. Mishra as a token of our remembrance, and to Mr. R.K. Jain, Secretary, NDMA. And now I...
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor to be here to propose vote of thanks. At the outset, I'd like to mention NDRF is conducting the 10th Raising Day in Delhi after a gap of about 4 years. We are a very small force with a small manpower with humble resources. So the arrangements you have seen here has been made possible by the small and dedicated team of NDRF officers with the help of NDMA and the Government of India. So if at all we have fallen short in any of our preparation or any of the courtesies we had to extend, I'm sorry for that, because Delhi conducting a show of this order is a very tall order, because here when we do this we are compared with the bigger brothers and sister forces who have been doing this for a number of years. So I'll start from the beginning, and I'll fail in my duty if I don't thank the Union Home Minister for gracing this occasion. He had been with us a couple of months earlier, which he mentioned in his speech. And before that, he has been to about 3 sites where NDRF had operated. He had taken keen interest in all our activities, and most of the points in his speech, though it's customary, we do give a draft speech for the Home Minister and likewise the dignitaries. So when he spoke, we were totally taken aback, because most of it, I'm sure, was extempore, and he spoke with his heart, and he set the tone for the day. And he set us a mission for next 1 year and years in future. So which direction, a vision which he has given us to follow. So I thank him on behalf of my DG and on behalf of the force for being here with us, where he was committed and he didn't have much time, but the minute he heard about NDRF function, he wanted to be available with us. I'd also like to thank Dr. P.K. Mishra. We have known him for a couple of years. He has been with us always, sometime in the background, sometime in the forefront, sometime in meetings, conferences. We read a lot of his literature. We have read his task force. He's always been there among us, those who are involved in disaster management and disaster response. Again, it was a challenge because we deviated from the path. We wanted to have a lecture session. We wanted to move away from the customary things. So DG took a lot of effort, and we were very keen. So one of the first lectures, though it is a 10th Raising Day, but the lecture series is the first of the lecture. So we were very keen to invite him today and to start with the lecture series. And with his vital inputs, we wanted today to be an occasion where we look forward. We look from a person who has great experience, who can guide us, who can lead us, who can show us the path. He had readily accepted our invitation, though he spoke himself about the impending pitfalls in a situation and a job profile which he is in. Sir, we thank you for coming here with us and rather spending almost the first half of the day with us and taking a lot of questions and being able to answer and being of great help to us whenever we need, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I fail again in my duty because there have been a number of agencies and a number of people who have been directly responsible. Secretary NDMA sir has been ever since he joined available to the force, and he has been taking the matters which are which have been lingering for long. So he's been here with us, he's present here. Sir, I thank you once again for accepting our invite and being a dignitary. I'd also like to thank 2 members of NDMA who have recently taken over. Maybe the distinguished audience may not be aware of them. Lieutenant General Shri N.C. Marwa, AVSM, and Dr. D.N. Sharma. They have taken over as members of NDMA, and they have accepted our invite, and they are present among us today. to see what a force is like. It is a first-hand interaction for you, sir. You have been seeing us, and I'm sure, sir, many years to follow. You will be here with us and you will guide us. Thank you, sir. I'd also like to former members of NDMA, two luminaries, two senior IPS officers who worked with NDMA before and who have been here with us, and they are present with us today, Shri K.M. Singh and Shri J.K. Sinha, sir. Sir, thank you for being here today with us and being present here. I'd also like to thank the senior police officers, retired officers, DGs of CPOs, DGs of other organizations, dignitaries from NDMA, NIDM, those involved in disaster management, from educational institutions, from various ministries who have come today and they are being part of this ceremony. I'll also fail again if I don't mention about the MHA, the JS Disaster Management, Shri V.V. Sharma, Additional Secretary Shri B.K. Prasad, MHA, Shrimati Nil Kamal Darbari, Joint Secretary NDMA. Then I'll also like to mention our FA of NDRF, Shri V. Venugopal. All of them have been instrumental in ensuring that today's function was conducted in smooth manner. I'll also like to thank various organizations, Ministry of Defence, DRDO, the Catering Service, Delhi Police, the staff of Home Minister's office, and others who are available here to ensure the first half and also the second half of the function goes smoothly. Finally, I'll fail again if I don't thank my DG, Shri O.P. Singh, who through his dynamic leadership and through his guidance was able to devise the program in such a manner that we set a tone for future raising days of NDRF, which will be more academic and which will be more professional in our display. I thank him once again on behalf of all the officers and men who are in NDRF. And lastly, but not the least, I'd like to thank the team of NDRF officers and men who are present here today and who are ensuring a smooth run of this function. Ladies and gentlemen, after this I will also like to request all of you to join for the second half of the function, which is a demonstration. As we have heard, the CSSR, the collapse structure NDRF demonstration is one of the best, and I think we can challenge anybody not only in professional conduct of our operations but also in conducting a demonstration. And I also request you to join us for lunch after this. Thank you very much, one and all.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here and making the first half of the day such a big success. You've been an excellent audience, and do join us for lunch now, and I expect all of you to join us at the Pragati Maidan for the demonstration too. Thank you very much.